84 T-type, 3.8 liter. We got the motor out a couple days ago and we started tearing it down. I like to really take my time tearing a motor down, clean as I go, even though it's going to get a thorough cleaning once it's all apart. If you take the time and you clean stuff up and you look at it, it's going to tell you a story. Just about anything you tear down is going to tell you a story. I can certainly tell from pulling this motor apart that the intake manifold's been off it before, the turbo's been off it before, but I don't believe the heads have been off, and I don't believe the oil pan's been off. You just can kind of tell by what fasteners go where and whether there's anti-seize or silicone or pipe dope or any other corruption on the fasteners or other things, or tool marks for that matter. So anyways, if you watch my videos, you probably see I'm a stickler for details and I'm a stickler for good trade practices. And this video really is going to be about cleaning up a deck surface. So this block is going to get completely torn down. It's going to get honed, possibly bored. We're waiting to hear back from piston manufacturers to what we have to do. But it looks, so far the bores look really good, so that might just get a hone. But the surfaces are going to get cleaned up, and an entirely new rotating assembly is going to end up in this block. So, but we're going to look at this as if we're doing a head gasket in chassis, or a head gasket, or a minor freshen up where we're not doing any machine work, which we don't do a lot of. But in a shop, in a dealership, head gasket jobs are fairly common. And a proper head gasket job is pretty uncommon. So I know I'm just babbling on at this point, but something that I get into trouble with on the forums and on Facebook and in the comments section is proper technique for cleaning a deck surface. So there are two tools that you can use, that I use to clean a deck surface. One of them is a Scotch-Brite from 3M or Norton or any other company. This one's getting pretty tired, but there's still some life in it. And the other is just a good old-fashioned scraper. This is an old Mac one. I bought it about 15 years ago. The thing I don't like about it is it's got these rubberized handles that just soak up grease and oil, and it's just absolutely garbage. I wish they'd go back to the old plastic, hard plastic handles. Anyways, it's got a pretty sharp edge on it. It doesn't have to be razor sharp. I just sharpen them with a file. I don't use a grinder or anything. Just run past it, put it in a vise and run past it with a file a couple times. Keeps a nice sharp edge on it. And that's it. I can prepare this surface for a new head and new head gasket, provided the surface is straight, with no other tools. One thing we're absolutely not going to use is one of these fucking things. These things are fucking bodywork. That's it. If you're using one of these, you're a hack. They do not go on any machine surfaces. I don't care if you're using the fancy plastic ends with the fingers on them and stuff that the guy selling them will say, oh, they're made for aluminum, they're made for whatever. If you're cleaning a gasket surface, use a Scotch-Brite, use a scraper. That's it. These are garbage. I can't wait for the comments section. A guy saying, I've been doing this for 30 years using these. Well, you've been doing it fucking wrong for 30 years. Throw this thing in the fucking garbage. So you can see, just light pressure. You don't really need to lean on it. You don't need to hit it with a hammer. Just work it back and forth. Take your time. And I work towards these studs. In a lot of cases, I'm like, we're going to have this machine, so we're actually going to pull these dowels out. Just work your way around, and it will take it off. Just work your way over the whole surface. Try to push the dirt and crap away, but we're going to clean this whole block up anyways. So I'm going to go over this whole surface. It's going to take me about 5 minutes to go over this whole surface with a scraper. So now I've gone over the whole surface with a scraper. It looks pretty good. Run my hand along it. I don't feel a lot of, really much of any gasket material or scale or any crap. It's pretty smooth, pretty clean. You can even start to see, if you look close enough, some of the machining marks from the mill. So we're getting close. The next thing we're going to do, is I got a new piece of Scotch-Brite. And we're going to take some Varsol or some cleaning solvent. I don't really like brake clean. It evaporates too fast, and it's really bad for you. I'm really trying to get away from using brake clean. I still use too much of it. The nice thing is this soaks up, sort of soaks up the solvent, so it'll sort of apply it as you go, or it'll work its way out of the Scotch-Brite as you work your way along. And the goal is to get this deck clean, but it doesn't have to be absolutely perfectly clean or look brand new or mirror finish. What we're trying to do is get it smooth and get all the high spots knocked off it. And you can already see it's starting to come up. There's some low spots here where there's been some corrosion in the water jackets of the cylinder head. We don't need that to be perfect because that's actually not going to be, there's not going to be anything touching that. The head gasket works and actually goes around that. So that doesn't need to be, we don't need to clean that to a shine. There's no sense if we were replacing a head gasket and putting this back together. So you work your way around here. It doesn't take too long, but it's all about elbow grease. If you're using an air tool, it would be done a lot faster, but you'd take way too much material. You would actually be grinding metal off. I know guys will come in the comments section later and say, oh, I've been doing this way and it works with my little grinder just fine. Well, they're wrong. The only way to know for sure you're not taking material off is to use a tool that absolutely can't take iron off, and this certainly can't take iron off. Something you want to be also concerned about is you can see this stuff is already wearing off. The aluminum oxide's wearing off this Scotch-Brite pad. That's going down in the water jackets. It's going in our head bolt holes. It's going in our lifter valley. You got to be mindful of that. If this engine were in the car, I would put plugs in all the holes, and I would tape off my water jackets with painter's tape. I'd maybe even tape off the whole lifter valley. I don't want any of this stuff going down in the pan because it'll go through the oil pump and go through your mains. Cummins actually has had a campaign to get rid of using those Scotch-Brite die grinder cookies on their warranty claims, because shortly after doing, say, a head gasket, they'd see main bearing failures within short order, and they'd pull the mains out and they'd find aluminum oxide from those grinder pads in. So you can see already we're getting pretty clean. This is if I gave this a wipe, that is clean enough to put a head on. If it's as long as the deck is straight, you could put a head right back on that. You don't need to get rid of all this black, this oxide. These are all in low spots. So here's a kind of crude drawing of what a deck surface kind of looks like if we were to magnify it and cut a cross section. When the mill goes by, it creates a surface finish. You can feel it with the tip of your finger, and you can see it when it's finished. It'll have a bunch of lines through it, swirl marks through it, and those are a thousandth and a half deep, those marks. You can't really measure it without a profilometer, but there's a tool you can measure it with, and depending at the speed of the machine and the tooling they use, they can have more or less of these highs and lows. And these highs and lows aren't necessarily a bad thing, because they create this sawtooth shape, can actually help clamp and hold. They create more surface area and ridges that can actually help hold a head gasket in place. Like I said, we've got this hole, or this mark here showing that depth is approximately 1/1000. Might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. But if we were to take our stupid friggin' body shop grinder and go over this, and we're trying to take, if this purple stuff here, pink stuff, is the oxide in those grooves, we want all that gone so we have a nice mirrored finish. What would end up happening is we have to take our grinder, and we're taking the highs down to the lows. But because the lows are uneven, we're going to end up with a wavy surface. So if we created this wavy surface, we've highs and lows and unevenness, and then we're going to ask that head gasket to take up that space, we're going to end up with little air pockets or little spaces of less clamping force. And that's where your head gasket failures are going to start. You can start getting channeling of antifreeze. You can start getting channeling of combustion gases. And once that starts to wedge its way in there, if you have combustion gas wedging its way in through one of these spaces, it's just slowly going to work and work and work and erode that head gasket till you have another failure. So it's very, very common that a head gasket failure on, let's say, a 200,000 mile engine will be followed by a head gasket failure within, say, 10,000 miles of the initial repair, and then followed by another head gasket repair and another head gasket repair till the customer finally gives up on the vehicle, or it gets sent to a machine shop where the repair is done right. We can take a head off, we can have that surface repaired or redone at a machine shop, we can replace the head gasket, but replacing this surface in the vehicle is impossible. You got to pull the engine and you have to have that machined, and in most shops and most applications that's just not economically viable. If we're pulling an engine, very often it's not going back in unless it's on something like a classic car or hot rod. So back to this, we haven't spent too much time. We're probably 10 minutes, and that's including me talking your ear off about this. You can see how clean this is, and like I said, this black oxidization, that's not to worry about. That's below the surface where the gasket's going to seal, or out of the place where the gasket isn't even going to go. So don't worry about that. That's clean enough there. Don't take too much material, and if you look close enough, you can still see the initial machining tool marks. That's what you're going for. This rough surface will actually help hold the gasket in place. So keep watching. We're going to finish tearing this engine down. I don't know if we're going to do any more videos on the teardown. We're going to mic the block, mic the crank, mic the pistons, mic everything, know what we have. Even though very few of the original parts are going back in, it's nice to know what you have and what was wearing and what was misbehaving.